So let's think about the power of questions. Now, historically, if you know anything about history, you've probably heard of this guy, Socrates. So Socrates greatly affected the world and has continued, especially with his Socratic method. Now, here's what you need to appreciate. Socrates was a tutor, and what he was trying to do as a tutor to the young men of Athens, who, of course, he corrupted because he taught them to think, and as a result, they killed him. But never mind that part of the story. What tutors were doing in Athens was actually learning and developing this questioning process with a group of people in order to help themselves learn. They weren't really worried about a legacy or passing on to followers something. It was more about they found that this process worked so well they would learn more. And bear in mind who these people are. So Socrates, his disciple as it were, or mentee, was a guy named Plato. His was Aristotle, and Aristotle tutored Alexander the Great. Now, this is a town of about 100,000 people, and these people weren't kin to each other. This is what some writers have called the genius meme, or so this genius almost chip or pattern where they were developing this genius among themselves. And the crux of it was learning to ask questions. And as they asked questions, the students would answer and learn to ask more questions. And this collective game of them thinking produced brilliant insights. And these are just the few we have written down. We don't know what all the rest of the Athenians were doing on, scraps of papyrus at the local Starbucks or Astrology Bucks or whatever it was back then. So understand that this is incredibly powerful. And it was the nature of these questions that really gave the idea to the Athenians that knowledge was available inside of you and from some other place because the brilliance of what the students would do. Well, I'm going to tell you, it's the brilliance of learning to ask better questions. So there's another person that was pretty great at questions. Historically, Jesus. Now, Jesus actually did have more of a mentor-mentee strategy in play. And so what Jesus was up to was trying to build into the lives of some individuals for them to go out and perpetuate his message. So not in the debate about messages or whatever, but what we can know is really quite impacted the world, right? So when you study his life and you go through the Gospels, you'll find he asked questions all the time, and his questions not only were there to make people think, but they confounded the enemies and they rattled people's thinking, and it left people without any kind of answer from time to time. So one day they bring to him the question of, do you pay to Caesar or do you pay money to God? Who's the key here? And of course the Caesars were kind of like gods in their thinking, and their terror and control in that Roman Empire in that day. And he asked for a coin. He looked at it and he said, whose inscription is on it? And the answer was Caesar's. And the conclusion about them admitting about the money, he said, well, give Caesar his stuff and God's his. And so with Jesus, what you'll find is he'll set up things with questions, not only rattling their brain with new ideas, but using those questions to actually perpetuate and clarify and support what he's trying to do. So you're going to find that the questions you develop not only get you into a reboot frame of mind, you're also going to find that they're convincing to clients and customers and other employees, other people, financiers, people who support your business. So there's Socrates, there's Jesus, and then there's the story of Pyrex. So one of my favorite stories, ran across an article or chapter in a book by Charles Chick Thompson. He tells the story more or less of how Pyrex was developed. This glass cookware that's tempered and you can cook with it in an oven. Well, there's a day they didn't have that stuff. And the way they invented it, according to the story, is a vice president was walking through the lab, and in that lab, a particular beaker or some glass thing fell and broke. And he looked at it and he turned to the head of the lab and basically said, "You know, glass breaks. Can't you fix that?" Well, they started working on it, came up with 36 ways to keep glass from breaking. 6 of them were economically viable. And so the Corningware or whatever came out of that process. Now, just think about that question. If he had asked something as simple as, notice glass breaks, and he asked why, or why does glass break? Well, in that context, he might have gotten a report that gave him all the data about glass breaking, a big, thick dissertation that just explained the physics of glass breaking. But instead, the question was, can't you do something about that? So it set in motion an entirely new game. So if you'd like to think about it another way, Ford famously, and I think Stephen Jobs liked to quote him, but Ford would say, if I gave them what they wanted, I would have given them faster horses. Well, that actually tells us something about the question that was driving him. The question was not, how do I make horses faster? How do I make horses faster? What would he have gotten with that question? Maybe faster horses, maybe breeding, maybe something. I don't know. Some behavioralism. They learn to train them to run faster. I don't know. But that's not what he asked. He asked a question more like, how can I make my cars faster than horses? Probably more questions about, some quality and making them quickly, etc. But somewhere in there is that game when you ask the question of how do I make a machine faster than a horse, leads you in a different direction than how do I make a horse faster than the last horse. That's the power of what's going on. And I don't know in your own business what questions you've been asking, but they're probably things like, what am I going to do? Or, are things ever going to go back? How should I change it? Are we going to make it? What's my competition doing? And I'm going to argue those questions are okay for a start, but they're not going to get you to the reboot stage you want to be at. For that, I want you to understand and appreciate the power of how tension seeks resolution.